Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Sweet Tooth Season 2. Now, this series, based on the DC comic of the same name, is only loosely based on the original material, but after Season 1 did surprisingly a lot better than a lot of people thought it would, probably because it came out during the pandemic and we had very little else to watch during that time. The second season builds on what happened in the first season, and it basically has us kick off right where we left off, with General Abbott taking over the Preserve, with Jeopard having to work with Amy Eden in order to figure out how to get the hybrid kids back, and with Gus and said hybrid kids having to work together to get out of the Preserve and to try and get away from the last men entirely. But that's all I'll say about the story. For these 8 episodes, we get a pretty slow-paced introduction to some new characters. We get a big battle between the Last Men and various other factions, and for quite a lot of the season, Jeopard and Gus are split up. In fact, we get to go between a lot of different characters as they slowly converge together in the story here. And while it does make sense to increase the tension by having the characters split up like this, it does feel like the series doesn't really get to a lot of its great character dynamics until the last few episodes. The rest is a lot of setup for a bunch of action scenes and set up for future plot points, while also having us get more scenes involving General Abbott as the series' main antagonist. Now, though Neil Sandilands does get to do a lot with his character, which I didn't expect after his fairly one-note introduction at the end of Season 1. He's a ruthless military general, of course, but at the same time, he's able to be as manipulative and as seemingly good for humanity as he claims to be, because he claims to just want to create a cure for this virus, when really it feels like he's mainly just trying to gain power in any way he can. Especially since he happens to manipulate several of the soldiers and Dr. Singh, who's mainly just trying to make the cure to heal his wife. But his story is probably one of my favorite of the season too, as he goes from genuinely trying to help Gus and to try and find a cure that's made in a humane way, to just going crazy because of the constant amount of work that Abbott piles on top of him. He basically goes from someone who's genuinely well-intentioned to someone who's completely lost it due to his circumstances. And it's pretty tragic to see. Though it does feel like the tone of the series can flip-flop between brutal PG-13 to R-rated levels of carnage to Home Alone style content, especially considering that the final episode has a lot of the soldiers getting beaten in a slightly less family-friendly versions of Home Alone traps inside of a forest. They don't always go hand in hand, but I do appreciate the amount of practical effects that went into the hybrid kids with their costumes, and even with one hybrid who's basically just a walking, talking little rodent. I do appreciate that clearly these effects had some effort put into them, and they look more real and they look more believable than a lot of bad CG done in theaters right now. And this is from a Netflix series where you'd expect a lot of poorly done effects, when really most of them do look acceptable for a TV series like this. And even the child actors who play the hybrids are mostly pretty good, especially Wendy, who looks like she's going to have a bigger role in the 3rd season, but she ends up being a good co-leader of the hybrid kids, and she ends up being a nice character to help Gus out, especially in the early goings. I wouldn't say that the 2nd season is better than the 1st, especially considering that it takes a while to get to the good stuff, but once it does, it reminds me of why I love this show, and I am interested in seeing how they are planning to take the story for a 3rd season. And it ultimately does feel like it does accomplish enough to justify an 8-episode length. So I'll give it an 8 out of 10. See you next time.